Hi, welcome back to Future Fast. And once again, we have a very special guest. And before I introduce our guest, Tom Pickering, for those of you who are here for the first time, this Future Fast is an effort to bring people who are doing things, who are working on things which are bound to have an impact on the future. And the idea of these conversations are to try to understand what are they doing, how do they see the future, how are they preparing for it, and uh, what are the things or the flags that if they identify something, and possibly we can take a cue for or a tip perhaps for our own businesses and life, and see how we can look at it and essentially better prepare for the kind of future that we are going into. And also there will be some near long term predictions as well. And the whole idea is to get more people to start thinking about the future. So, having said that, we will get down to bringing our guest today. So, Tom Pickering is a multifaceted personality. Uh, he's a zero carbon champion, if I can put that, and he's been consulting. He's been advising a lot of businesses. He's been a turnaround specialist for a fairly long time. And personally, he's been a cycling enthusiast. He also has a business. Perhaps we'll also talk about that. I get him to talk about it in the course of it. And he is also part of a fund which is essentially to encourage zero carbon initiative. And we'll perhaps also talk about that. And he's a person, he's one of the voices that I thought we should uh, bring and perhaps get more people to hear. And that's why, we have Tom. And Tom, thank you so much for making time to do this with us and being here. Welcome to Future Fast.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's my pleasure. I think your focus on the future and how do we see the future and how do we see that panning out is a very interesting focus. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, Tom, can we start with your journey? What got you to become a evangelist, if I can say that, for you know doing what you're doing from coming in from being a turnaround specialist. And obviously, turnaround is more primarily about bringing economic change, but what you're trying to do is more about bringing sustainable change.
Yeah.
So, how did this happen?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I think just brief bit of background. I mean, my whole career, my focus has been to within an organization to make myself obsolete, to develop a team to enable them to do it themselves. And that's really been my focus throughout my whole career. And it suited my style, my what plays to my strengths, which is a passion for other people. But you're absolutely right. It's about sustainability, and a lot of the reason why I'm a broad thinker and I share broad thoughts is because businesses now have to take the right actions. If you take shortcuts, and or if you take unethical decisions, they simply get exposed, and they will not deliver economic value, or they may deliver some very short economic value, but no sustainable economic value. So I think that's really critical in terms of my focus. Professionally, I'm a fellow of the Institute of Engineering and Technology. Yes, I'm a turnaround exec. I'm a founder. I've been a Silicon Valley exec, technology, proper technology, as well as I cut my teeth in the automotive industry. And I set myself a target by my early sort of mid 20s to become a director of an automotive manufacturing company, which I achieved quite early on in my career. But I continually found myself running out of things to do. So if I reflect on the past as a sort of set the scene, I think, throughout my career, the whole focus of the economy has been and investment has been based around oil consumption. The biggest investment category has been oil, and that's just recently switched to technology. Investment in technology now has overtaken oil, which is a very interesting switch. And I think the other thing around the 1970s was that there was a focus on more, as if more was the answer to everything. And you'll see this
Right.
everywhere. I don't know how prevalent this is in India, but certainly in the UK, MBA programs are all dominated by more. And I'll talk a bit about that later in a bit more detail. I think what that's given rise to in terms of a challenge for us is excessive consumption. Everybody is buying stuff we don't need. And it's not sustainable. So if you look at consumption of anything, consumption of plastics, they're all hockey sticks, consumption of oil,
Correct.
etc. And this has been fueled by, in the UK for sure, low inflation, fueled by China, supplying cheap products en masse. And I think what's happened during this journey is there's then been a switch to tech domination, which is the cycle. I'll talk a bit about psychology because which is one of the things I'll hopefully articulate throughout this talk, Nanju, which is around the focus on the underlying psychology of technology currently is around growth and domination. And this is
Right.
not necessarily doing the right thing. You'll find people are talking about disruption. It's not disruption, it's destruction. So the psychology is highly misleading. And there's also another mantra, and this is a tip, a couple of tips from my book I wrote on technology is, everybody's always talking as if more tech will fix everything, when in fact, I personally believe that tech is creating quite a few unfixable problems. So problems that you cannot resolve just by its very nature. So there's a psychology which drives things as well. I think I'd add there's an element of fascism as well. And what do I mean by fascism? Technically, fascism is when the tech companies are actually influencing governments. So if you look at, I did a talk about 5 years ago to a whole load of IT directors in the public sector. And if you look at the strategy for the UK government in technology, it's very much that Google are partners and Facebook were partners at that time, advising government. And this is an element of fascism, which is utterly unique. And again, I'll talk a bit about that, which is tending towards corporate socialism. And I think the other thing I'd add as well, during the last 40 years in terms of the past, is China. China, in my early career, were part of a solution, but a limited part of a solution. I think people largely underestimated their plan, and they basically got a 5-stage plan, which isn't very well publicized. The technology plan is pretty well publicized, but their 5-stage development plan isn't. The first stage, these are off the top of my head really, but the stages are basic to develop their own market, which they've done, their own internal market, and they've got a very aggressive market which develops some very competitive products. So if you develop products in a very competitive market, you're going to have market leading products. The second thing was their Belt and Road Initiative, which is, if I'm cynical, I think it's indebting countries that can't afford to pay back, but also opening up the logistics and breaking down internal barriers to sell producs. The other aspect is infrastructure investment, which is around investing in power stations and such like, which the UK government rejected because we view China largely as a nefarious power, and we don't want to be beholden to them. And then the last stage, which we're sort of moving into now, which is really devastating, having actually develop their products in a tough home market, they're then beginning to export their products, and you'll see this with batteries and electric vehicles. And if you look at and also they're infiltrating organizations, and it's not in a good way. And again, I was at a talk recently. I was on a government investment panel recently talking, and one of the speakers introducing this was saying we will not we need to engage with our competitors to sort out the climate crisis. Well, in fact, that was justifying actually welcoming the Chinese Communist Party to the infrastructure of UK tech strategy, which is a very short-sighted view. And I think it's very important as nations, and I guess it's the same in India, to do things on our own terms rather than be driven by an external force because there's a distinct danger, I think, globally that China will overrun our automotive manufacturing industry in the UK by driving their own agenda. And it's very important we do things on our own terms. And I think, without wishing to state the obvious, it's also very important that we have businesses that make profit, frankly. And Chinese businesses, China do not just compete, they attack, right? And and that's a completely different world. And it's also a world that most UK investors or Western investors will not invest in. And they've got business models which are profitless growth business models, and you simply can't compete with them. So it's very important that we maintain our own our own sovereignty, both as individual citizens and also governments, to keep out the the nefarious influences. So you'll find those are the sorts of things that I talk about broadly, Nanju, that I think really matter.
How do you see the pandemic having affected this whole space, Tom? Don't you think that has actually affected the dependency in China has reduced post-pandemic?
Yeah, so I think good question. I think the pandemic was really critical, and not really in a good way. Well, there were two outcomes of the pandemic, and I can only speak from a UK perspective, but there was a realization when the pandemic kicked in that actually we'd lost it. So I just described the 40 years. We'd lost sight of what we are as human beings, what good looks like, what it is to be motivated, what's the role of businesses, and basic interaction. So, do you walk past someone in the street and talk to them? And the value of that, that having a relationship. So the whole world was slowed down. And it was a bit like sort of waking up after a hangover, and people realizing actually maybe there's a better way to do things. So that was one thread, which I think was really strong, which I did a whole series of talks with a whole raft of my network, which I call the pub, to make it relatively informal, where I got some investors, some global leaders together to try and make sense of what was going on. And from that, which I'll talk about in a second, I came up with the top 7. Which I think were the learnings there. There was another thread, which was some of these fascist organizations, the technology companies, the World Economic Forum, saw this as a huge opportunity. So I don't know if you remember, the World Economic Forum started off talking about global warming, and now it's gone to climate emergency. Now, in it, and they'd say they took advantage of the fear. And the problem with this ideology is it becomes totalitarian, and it becomes very difficult to disagree with. And they've driven that agenda, which has usurped, in my analysis, a lot of the government strategy, a lot of local strategies. So what you'll find is when you're talking about electric vehicles, there's a club of people who are really passionate about electric vehicles without really considering the implications of electric vehicles. And there's hydrogen technology, for example, which I've looked at personally, and electric vehicles, and carbon capture, all three of which are flawed, and they require more of a hybrid, innovative strategy to make these things work. So I think the World Economic Forum, conversely to what the learnings of the pandemic were, have driven their own agenda, and it's become quite tyrannical, and it's really badly affecting economies. So, and it's also providing the opportunity for China to run roughshod over our economies. So, specifically locally, we've got initiatives going on in the UK, like ULEZ, which is the rollout of the sort of zero emission zone in London, which is being expanded, which is having a substantial effect on businesses. And we need to make if people haven't got money, Nanju, they're not going to care about this sustainability.
Right.
And the Dutch farmers have been just recently, there are 3,000 Dutch farmers who've been kicked off their land and been banned from farming because of nitrogen limits. And interesting, Holland, or the Dutch, are the second largest food producer in the world, right? So that's no small deal. And we've got issues like central central bank digital currency, which is coming in without being, properly thought through, and the really big sort of implications for democracy there. So I think there's so if I just talk briefly about and of course there were other things that took place, like there was the danger with human beings is if in the shutdown, or there's less dialogue, let's say, we're not having as much contact with each other, talking like we're talking now, challenging each other's ideas, having productive dialogue, we tend to believe our own truths. And most of the thoughts that come into our minds, if unless they are challenged, become facts. So if we're not careful, we'll start to believe our own untruths. And one of the parallels with this situation and my background in company turnaround and studying the psychology of company turnaround is the victim-centric culture, which is dominating the US and the UK, and woke culture. And this is really what I describe as being professionalizing the mental illness of a company turnaround. So it's all the same psychology, and it's very interesting because it's exactly the same analysis, which is one of my books, which I'll come on to later, which is around the evil of silence. And these are all tools which are very important to understand to try and make sense of the dialogue. And I think technology as well is vital to understand, because technology is actually fanning the flames. So it's actually giving life to this. It's actually providing the opportunity to take a very isolated, very nasty situation and share that globally, and then create a whole raft of dialogue behind that to support somebody's ideology of some variety or other. So technology is
I agree, as much as I like to agree on that, but at the same time, don't you think technology is also making it so easy for us to communicate like this?
Yeah, I think
so. I think it comes down to how we use technology, right? It's not technology by itself.
Yeah, well, I think it's a really good question. I think absolutely, as a communication tool, Zoom is a great technology, and probably we got to know each other through LinkedIn, or you suggested through LinkedIn. So, which is fine, which is really that is all good. I think the things that concern me is technology which is parasitic, which is feeding off existing business models without really a compelling. And I'll talk a bit about this later, but I agree to a degree, in a limited way, it is fine from a communication and from a limited social media perspective. But it also makes us very vulnerable, and we are very vulnerable as human beings. And we're embarking on a technology journey, Nanju, without really knowing actually what we are as human beings. So I started a series of talks with a good friend of mine, talking about professional development, and actually after the first talk, we've spent the rest of the time talking about what is it to be a human being, because unless you know what it is to be a human being, then nothing else really makes sense in terms of that reference. So,
Tom, I don't know if you're familiar with a person called Sadhguru in India. he's a spiritual guru.
Okay.
And I was watching a video some time ago. Somebody actually suggested, and there was a question. I think incidentally that conversation recording I saw, but it happened in London. So they were talking about technology and isn't it affecting people? And his response was like what you said. It's more important. So it's such a I don't know. Have you heard of him? Have you ever looked up any of his talks?
No, I haven't actually. No, it's interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
So he actually said the same thing, that we should know what we are as human beings first before we.
Yeah, and I think there's a word as well I use quite a lot, but carefully, is reckless. And it's not a word which is embarking on something without really understanding what the outcome is. Okay. And I think technology is definitely one of those things. And if you take, I'm on a committee for artificial intelligence, for example, and so there are discussions I attend, and people are doing things where they really haven't got any clue about what it is to be a human being, and yet we're talking about artificial intelligence, which has got a whole raft of dynamics which are highly manipulative and very effective at taking advantage of our weaknesses as human beings.
No, well, I think that's a very negative way of looking at it, right? It's basically what you ask from it. So essentially, it makes a lot of things easy.
um, well, I come at this from understanding the psychology of it, Nanju, right? So
Mhm.
what drives you, okay, and me and everybody, other human on this planet, is what we think, okay?
Correct. But artificial intelligence, a machine which is operating on what we call as algorithms, are essentially set of rules,
Yes, but who
right?
makes the,
So
yeah,
they don't have see, they can't react to I mean, empathy for one. They just don't exist. So there is no way they can rule us or control our destiny or
it is. But
manipulate us.
the difficulty with this is, um, I mean, if you take Chat GPT, for example, right, there's a really important language, right, is so important to us as human beings, okay?
Right.
Language. It's basically, we are pretty much, our whole, what you think and what makes you tick is what makes you human. And our, the way we communicate, what we say is very important. And we have virtually no understanding of our language, right? Interesting enough, when it goes back to Plato, okay, and Socrates, they really understood language, okay, and they really understood the importance because there was no technology whatsoever, and we've totally lost the importance of language, Nanju. Now, my concern, and I'm not saying it's all wrong, but this is I've got some very grave concerns, okay, and this is a very grave concern. And I talked about more technology will fix it. This is something that more technology will not fix. Chat GPT is actually creating language, okay, in a way that's not a human way. And that is, if you're actually creating language, right, that has the immense ability to manipulate you, right? And the way it's constructed. So when I look at what is being said and way things are being constructed, even the way it's filtering what's right or wrong, you're moving
Right.
into a realm which is highly manipulative. And my concern, the reason why I wrote my books, Nanju, was that people have no knowledge of this whatsoever, right? They have no knowledge of what makes you tick or what drives you. Now, you probably, and that's why I run my winning thinking program to, and also there's if you just take you and I in isolation, we don't operate in isolation. We operate with people around us, okay? And we're only as good as the people around us to fix problems. So our
Correct.
human intelligence is very much dictated by our ability to interact and figure out ways of fixing problems. And when you actually introduce artificial intelligence, it's oil and water. It doesn't augment. So we could have there's a whole detailed discussion around that. That's the reason why I wrote a book about it. But the real crux of it is people, if you give people the opportunity to think, they have unbelievable power to resolve issues, particularly as a team. And so my main focus is to harness that power. And throughout my career, pretty much, I've spent a lot of my career, even though I'm an engineer and technologist, taking technology out to improve businesses because it becomes overwhelming. So just taking a simple example, but it's relevant to now. In manufacturing, a lot of people put MRP systems in, and MRP systems only work with 95% data accuracy because that 5% kills the system, and it creates inaccuracy, kills the system. And you'll find at the moment people are talking about data when in fact human beings don't need much data to make good decisions. But there are some things that people are not good at doing. So, for example, routing vehicles. When you get past 10 permutations of delivery driver, it goes to billions, right? And so obviously that's not something that plays to our strength. So there are some things I think that fit quite well, which are isolated. There's controlling nuclear fusion is a good application of artificial intelligence because we simply can't do it fast enough. But there are where that human interface comes into play, it's very destructive. And I'm saying that from the psychological perspective, which most people don't understand. And that's where my concerns come from. That's why I've written books on this. So if I just talk about, so technology, I think is, yes, I tend to exaggerate slightly to make the point, but there are some serious concerns that technology are creating problems they will not be able to fix. So I think a lot of spheres artificial intelligence will create problems that we will not be able to fix. I think that on the other side, though, in terms of the learnings from the pandemic, so I talked about two threads. One was a sort of technology fascist type thread, which we just touched on. The other one is actually what is actually sustainable, and I came up with sort of 7 things. First one is to create work for all levels, and that means, so one of the mantras around technology is that you create higher value jobs and you get rid of the boring jobs. That is a seriously damaging thing to do. One, it's unmotivating psychologically because we need simple things as well as complicated things, but also it marginalizes a huge amount of the population from the workforce, right?
I agree with you. There have been such arguments that technology will eliminate the boring jobs. See, I think it would be an economic play. It's not what is interesting or boring. It always comes down to what is paying. So if a person doing it better, I mean, if it is better from an economic perspective, I think a lot of people will still have people. But I don't think at the same time, I don't think it will come to a point in a socialist sense where government demands no technology because we have a lot of population from an India context or in China perhaps, that it has to be low. There was a time, right? I mean, mechanization and automation was delayed because they thought that's the only way to keep employment happening.
Yeah.
But only when the markets opened up, a lot of private jobs started coming up. So from that respect, it's different.
Yeah.
But this argument, I'm completely with you. I think it's
so I'm not suggesting
the argument to say that boring jobs will be out. No,
yeah,
I don't
no.
think
So I don't think there are. I'd say one. There's no, again, the psychology, boring job, right?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a boring job. I've run factories and I can show you, if you're doing a boring job, I can make it exciting. Trust me, Nanju, right? And I think there's an art to doing every job. And actually those jobs, work is very important for our well-being. So, and there are people who are not so able, and the sign of a civilized society is actually an ability to look after people. So one of the most motivating things I've got locally is a autistic center, and they run a cafe and the autistic people work in the cafe. And that transforms their life, cleaning the tables, the most simple things, and it's extraordinary. And that's what, and when you touch that, that's what humanity, that's what good looks like in my view. So it's very important we create work for all levels. I'm not particularly talking about how, but I just talk about the mantras, the antithesis maybe. Right. And that protects employment because, and also if you take, society does not work without work, basically either. If you take anybody, I'm a Christian. If you take pastors, when they go out to Africa, if there's no work, they don't bother pastoring people, trying to, tell them about Christianity. They create work first because the family doesn't work, Nanju. Without work, the family doesn't work and the whole thing disintegrates. So work is vital. I think the second thing is we have to pay more money for what we buy. Okay. So I talked a bit about China keeping prices low. The cost of buying cheap, this from China, whatever these things are, is a lot of coal that's been burnt in China. And we're not paying the full price for that. So we need to charge more money for things and to drive down consumption and consume less, but to make profit as well. So there has to be a way of charging, and I put this into practice in my cycling business. Very practically, I put all of these points in my cycling business. I've applied this.
But you do have carbon tax, right, in UK?
No. Well,
you don't have carbon tax? No?
Well, there's carbon credits. There's all kinds of, but I think
not the credits, carbon tax. I think
no, there's no carbon
Canada
tax, no.
And some of the European countries have carbon tax.
Yeah, I don't think so, no. But I think in principle, we've got to start paying more for things. I think we've got to reuse things as well. And this is an interesting part of the economy.
So effectively, you are for carbon tax, man.
Yeah, I think, well, if you just take electric vehicles, right, and electric vehicle batteries, China are producing the electricity to process lithium using coal, which is creates twice as much carbon dioxide as gas. And it's very cheap and very abundant. So in buying a electric vehicle battery from China, which has consumed all that energy very cheaply, we are trashing the planet. Okay.
Good.
So in that situation, my view is we've got to level that playing field, right? To actually create what does good look like. And China are not playing by those rules. They've said, we're going to consume more coal up to the end of 2030. And interesting enough, they will also trash our industries along that way as well. That's what concerns me, because so we have to level that up. I agree. So yes, it is.
So you basically say, look at the 360-degree, look at the source of supply as well, where it's coming
Correct.
from, how it's produced, what is the source of energy for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've got. I totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the other thing is reusing things, and this is a whole industry itself. So we throw too much away. We don't fix enough stuff.
No, but see, China has almost 50% of new cars sold are all electric. So at least that way they have significantly reduced their carbon emissions, right? So somewhere they're making it up as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've done the analysis on that as well.
Because if you look at, I think what last I remember reading in Europe, not specifically UK, across Europe, it is still in single digit, your electric car buying. So
Yeah.
you're still burning a lot of fossil fuels. So they are
Well,
almost 50%. So that way they somewhere, maybe at the, if you look at a 360-degree, the source has been that, but at least on the road, the burn has come down. So somewhere things are
well,
getting balanced,
yeah,
right?
I've looked at that balance, but if they roughly a rough estimate of that, it'll take 7 years for that electric vehicle to pay back the carbon dioxide and energy. Okay.
Oh, is that? Okay.
Yeah, I've done the
Interesting.
analysis on that, and there's a whole raft of other issues with it as well, which are very problematic.
No, but versus if you in Europe adopt, let's say you get to 50% of new cars to electric, just imagine what wonders it can achieve.
Well, there's an implication with all of that. So this is a generalization. There are some upsides, but as an ideology, in my view,
No, I'm with you on that. I agree. You need to have
so
it.
if just to cover that point, I think yes, electric vehicles do play a part in inner cities to reduce carbon pollution. That makes sense in a limited way. But when you get out of the city, I think Toyota have got the right strategy to build hybrids. I think longer journeys, because the other aspect of this is cost. Okay, the one that there's so much misleading information around electric vehicles and so much ideology, but basically, yes, electric vehicle is more efficient than a diesel powered car
Fossil
for
fuels.
sure.
Yeah.
But the infrastructure costs of in the background are 50% of the US GDP until 2050, right? That is completely unaffordable. So when people are talking about that much of the problem, yes, it makes sense. As I said, I'm a broad thinker. I'm considering the broader implications, and there are other implications as well which become critical, which is the energy to recycle lithium. There's geopolitical issues. There's a major issue with water pollution. The amount of water that lithium requires to process it is phenomenal. There's a whole raft of issues, and this all needs to be done properly, Nanju, and it's not being done properly at the moment. And everybody knows about the what is it in the batteries? I've forgotten just now. Begins with C.
So
What's the mineral begins with C in batteries? Completely forgotten. But
cobalt.
The cobalt, yeah, very damaging element.
Yeah, cobalt is far more damaging than lithium. In fact,
Well,
lithium has far lesser impact than cobalt.
Yeah, but the water consumption lithium is absolutely unbelievably high. So
no, but water can be purified thereafter. So
yeah, but
from that perspective,
but is it? I don't think it is being anyway. But it's actually so there's these other issues with this, and if you look at the bigger picture, we need to look at the bigger picture. Overall, I think electric vehicles will make one. It'll make us at the moment less wealthy, because China will run over our economies with their industrialization. That's a serious problem, and in the short term, it's all being fueled with coal, producing the batteries. So, and there's a huge grid implications and a cost in the background, which is so. I'm not suggesting this is not the place to have a complete discussion, but these discussions, I'm trying to identify. The puritanical ideology is dangerous. Of making statements like EVs are the future or something. So the other side of the point number 4 in relation to the top 7 is people relationships. Okay, so from a very practical perspective, there's been a very large increase in suicide in the West. I don't know what it's like in India, but people are losing themselves. And I think, they're losing their grounding. They're becoming undone slightly with technology. They're not playing the way they used to. They're not developing relationships. So whatever we do has got to develop relationships. I think reducing online and technology, and this is some of the negative sides, I think, of technology. I think the other problem with technology is highly addictive. Okay, it triggers dopamine, and it's if you think about the amount of time you spend, I get every week I get a summary of how much time I spend on my phone, which really scares me, and surprises me as well. And actually, I think, well, actually, could I have used that time any better, Nanju? What actually have I achieved as a consequence of that? And yes, we've had this discussion, which is great. So I think and this is, I think, very important to regain the self. So when you get off technology, I think you begin to feel more grounded and you're less manipulated, and you begin to discover yourself. And the way you discover yourself is by taking new action, which is what part of the Willing Thinking program. So the point number 6 is supporting local and community. Very important to develop relationships. During the lockdown, people communicated, they got to know each other, gave people the time of day. It's all part of developing your well-being and making you feel like a human being, and actually enabling mutual success. And there's a really interesting paradox. I mean, my program's called Winning Thinking, and actually winning is a problem in business because what we do should be mutually successful. If I win at the cost of you, that is not clever. Whenever I've negotiated, Nanju, with suppliers, I've always said, look, I need you to reduce costs, but I need you to improve your profitability as well. And I'm going to work with you to improve your profitability. Just reducing your profitability by reducing costs is just stupid. So it has to be mutual. I think the other thing is intimacy as well, which is acknowledging and valuing everybody's view. So in this dialogue, how do we really understand each other? Do I understand your perspective, Nanju, through this conversation? And when we have this conversation, what have we learned? So what are we going to do differently? So if we're having conversations and we're just doing the same things, we're just making more EVs. Now, we're not being challenged by some of the left of field things, which are maybe in the too difficult category. No, are we learning? So that's really important in terms of, and acknowledging people, just understand, using someone's name is really important, and valuing different views. And that's the essence of innovation as well, because it's about that, developing that dynamic.
It's a similar argument here, where many of my friends are buying electric vehicle, and in India, 50% of electricity source is still coal.
Is it? Right. Okay.
Yeah. So almost 50%. I mean, government is building we are perhaps the largest solar power generator in the world, because we have so much, but we are a very large country. We just need so much more power.
Yeah.
So it's coming down. It used to be 74% coal. So it's come down to about 48% or 50%, around that.
Yeah.
And we have about 35 nuclear power plants are getting built, but it takes time. Nuclear power plants take almost 15 years to go live.
Yeah.
So we're still far more. Solar is happening, wind is happening, nuclear is happening, but we will not be out of coal for another 35 years.
Yeah, I know. And interesting enough, actually, I do think fossil fuel consumption needs to increase. Okay, because people forget that oil is actually a raw material as well. It actually is what the basis of producing plastics. And I don't advocate we produce plastics, but there's a whole raft of things that are produced with oil. And I don't know about coal so much, but actually, maybe we come onto this in a bit. I've got some points on that, which maybe we come back to, if that's okay, Nanju.
Sure.
So that's my attempt to try and explain the that section. of the pandemic.
Right. And uh, so basically, what is the core of your learning, right? I mean, in terms of you having worked with so many uh, technology entrepreneurs, so many businesses.
Yeah.
Uh, now, how do you translate that learning into this approach of when you said, a win-win, if I can put what you're suggesting as, not winning at another's cost is more of a win-win approach, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
both of us can win. So
Yeah.
I like to put that more from it's more a philosophy of distributed economy where
Yeah.
everybody thrives and sustains.
Yeah.
So how do you approach it coming from, because every business chooses to be I win, right? At
Yeah.
no matter at whose cost, but I should win.
Yeah.
So how do you work with entrepreneurs and business, and how easy or difficult is it? Is that for you to communicate with those entrepreneurs when you work with them
Yeah.
to say that it's not about winning at any cost,
Yeah.
but still win?
Yeah. I think it's also it's not just about. Thank you for that. I think it's also there's the issue with winning, which you've just described, not at the cost of somebody else, which is very important. And that actually the context of that is particularly important with regards to China, because China are unique. I mean, India is a very collaborative nation. They're very, naturally collaborative. I think um, the the main focus is also about sustainability, okay, not destroying things and building value. So if I look at, we talked a bit about, technology, okay. The question is that incremental value or is it destroying value, right? Is it parasitic? Is it feeding off? So if you take banking, or the simplest example, it's a really simple example. I've done a lot of work in logistics in my career. If you take any logistics network, okay, there's always, if you take London, it's very dense, Nanju, and it's very easy to make money. And then you go to a less populated part of the UK, and that driver has to travel a lot further to hit that economic model. And it's very easy to pick off London if you're a new entrant and forget about the other one, right?
Right, right.
And that analogy actually I think is very helpful when
No,
you
but
talk.
that is where technology actually helps, right? Uh, Perhaps it becomes much easy to send a UAV drone, which can just go and deliver.
Well,
And
sorry. Well, so I'm just let me sorry that I'm not. Yeah, that's fine. Let me just the point I'm trying to make is that if I was going to launch a technology business, right, I wanted to attack a bank, right. What I would do is I would attack that market in London and leave the other one, right?
ah,
Yeah,
right,
that's
right.
it. That's what I describe as being parasitic. Okay,
Mm,
a
mm,
parasitic strategy. What you've just described, if it makes sense, in terms of improving, and if it's the right thing to do, roughly in line with the top 7, let's say, or some top 7 type strategy, then if that's part of a strategy which makes sense, then yeah, of course, do that. Or the routing, a good example is the routing software, which Google Maps or whatever you use in India.
mm.
That's a very effective piece of technology, which I think is a very good use of technology, which is something that people are not very good at doing, which actually augments us quite well. Although, right, there's a danger with it. I used to know my way around London, okay, but if you've got these tools, you stop thinking, and I don't know my way around London anymore, right? So
Uh,
there's a
it's
cost.
it's same with me as well. I've stopped using my head over it. I just go with the map.
Yeah, and that's
Eh,
really important in terms of developing capability. Okay, so we talked about simple jobs. Actually, there's value in those simple jobs because it you know there's it helps you to think. So the problem is if you've got too many of these things, you stop thinking and you become a bit of a danger to yourself, and it reduces some of the teamwork, the intimacy, getting to know each other, fixing problems and things. So if you're not careful, you can inadvertently create quite a non-thinking culture. So yeah, so I think that they're the 2 points. So I think yes, win-win or mutual benefit is critical, particularly at the moment, and particularly globally. It's so important what China does
No, but
in relation.
how do these small entrepreneurs respond when you go with this? I mean, how easy or difficult is it for them to align to this when
Well,
you work
it's
with
more
them?
my, I mean, the way it manifests itself is that most technology businesses I look at, I won't have anything to do with, right? Because they're not sustainable, or they're attacking, or I use that example of picking off the easy bits just to destroy something. That's something I'm not interested in doing, even if it makes money, right? I'm just not
Mhm.
personally, I'm not interested in doing that. There are other things along those lines which concern me greatly. Cryptocurrency, I think that's and, and other artificial intelligence broadly, I won't have anything to do with. A lot of the technology, electric vehicles, I am involved with electric vehicles from the perspective of trying to embed the top 7 points, Nanju, right?
Mhm.
In as a balanced view. But I will not let over my dead body, let China wreck our automotive industry. That's too costly for me, right?
Mhm.
So that has to be done properly, and I think we're very close to losing that in the UK. We're very close to losing that race completely in the UK. There's only one battery plant in the UK, which is Envision up in the northeast, supplying Nissan, and there's other micro Chinese businesses in the UK which are likely to start growing from a automotive footprint, which is very damaging. So in terms of electric vehicles, it's electric vehicles that the best of that tells, not in an ideological way, but trying to do the things I've just described, right?
Right, right,
With a focus on creating local employment, with a craze of making money, with getting the environmental aspects, getting the carbon aspects that we talked about, the
right.
energy aspects, all of those things right, and the supply chain, and frankly also avoid buying from China, because China will attack, even if they're supplying one piece of your technology or one raw material. They've unfortunately they don't operate in the same, in this mutual sort of way. So I think they're robust, making sure the supply chain is robust and not taking shortcuts. And that is very, very, very difficult, Nanju. Right. So that's something that really appeals to me. And I've got work going on there. There's other projects that I've got going on as well, which are similar relation to power generation. There's a tidal power generation plant which I'm involved with at the moment, raising some money for. That's a really good project. Generates a lot of free energy with no cost whatsoever. Well, there's an infrastructure cost, but it's a very
Mhm.
effective way of creating power. But um, I think if I just touch on my books, because there's something more interesting, I think, about the environment than the talking about electric vehicles, which I think is important, because we started talking about technology, and I started saying that we don't know what drives us. Most people don't know what drives them, Nanju. You get out of the bed in the morning, you just do what you do. Um, or you've got a strategy, but why are you doing that strategy? Or you get in your car and you go across a roundabout and you don't know, did you look across that roundabout? Were you thinking? So this is a lot of what we do is automatic, and we don't do a lot of thinking in our day. Technically, we only do about 1 to 2% of thinking in our day. And so most of what we do is driven by something that we don't fully understand. And that really matters to me. So so in terms of the relevance of my experience to this particular situation, I've written 5 books. One is the evil of silence. So a lot of dialogue. If you take the ideology around electric vehicles, I say electric
Right.
vehicles are bad, you say electric vehicles are good. Then you've got this sort of conflict of ideology. There's a lot of that going on, and there's a lot of people are not taking a broad view or actually encouraging that debate to come up with a better solution. So our ability to speak up is absolutely vital, and also
Yeah. Well,
um,
in India context, I'm I question electric vehicles because we just don't have the infrastructure. One, we don't make the batteries, so we are importing. So the same question what you brought about, the 360-degree
Yeah,
aspect.
yeah,
And two, we don't have the infrastructure to address the afterlife of a battery,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
From an India context. So there
Yeah,
are two facilities coming up. So the argument people make is that as things pick up, infrastructure will also develop.
yeah.
So,
And no one's looking
so
at that, and that's a massive cost, which makes it.
it is a cost, but it also is a demand. Then see, now we have a lot of economy cars to premium cars driving with
Yeah, but
which are powered by electric batteries, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
these battery lives are typically 8 to 10 years at best.
yeah.
So they're all just being sold for last 2 years. So we
Yes,
still have a little bit of a window before they have to be looked at from a point of repurposing.
yeah,
So so the numbers will get big. So I think essentially economics has to drive all the adoptions.
yeah. Well, if you look at the economics, you wouldn't. If you look at the economics, you would not invest in electric vehicles. You would not.
Can we still go with the fossil fuels then?
Yes, we should still have some fossil fuels. Yeah, absolutely. The pure electric vehicle strategy is, in my view, unaffordable. When you look at the overall costs, people will not be able to afford it, and we cannot afford the infrastructure costs. It's not, and I can send you some analysis on that, but it's
In
unaffordable.
India, it's kind of, see, what is the cheapest electric vehicle in India? Uh,
Scooter.
it's no, not the two wheeler. Of course, we have two wheelers which have become
Yeah,
way cheaper.
yeah.
But an electric car, uh, it's about 8 lakhs. So how much would that be? That's about $100,000.
$100,000.
Yes.
$100,000. It's quite a lot of money, isn't it?
No, $10,000.
$10,000. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's not just the vehicle, right? It's the overall picture. It's the recycling of the battery. It's the cost of running that versus fossil fuels, and it has to
Oh,
be
yeah.
affordable.
See, right now, these are not in the equation, right?
I know.
Right now, the government or the brand or the people are not thinking of where they came from. The source is not looked at.
I know. I
I
know.
get your point. If you look at a 360-degree view, that's the ideal way, right? But can we take people towards that?
Well, when I look at a situation, you ask me, right? You ask me, what do I say to technology entrepreneurs?
Right.
I would say I've done the top level analysis on this. If I was going to
Mhm.
invest in an electric vehicle business to do, I would say don't do it, right? Because it's unaffordable and nobody is it just makes no economic sense. And in fact, it'll make things a lot worse because we'll all become very poor, we'll not be able to afford them, and we'll have no money to fix the planet, right? That's in a really simple summary, that's the sort of reality of electric vehicles. But they do play a part in an overall picture, and this is the
Right.
danger of ideology. Okay, so it's very important we have balanced discussions around this stuff. So that's around the silencing side of this. The other side is the menticide. So there's actually menticide here. Do you know what menticide is?
No.
It's when people talk about electric vehicles so much that you stop
Right.
talking about your concerns, right? So it becomes overwhelming. Okay, that the mantra of electric vehicles of the future, they're going to save the planet. There's no emissions. No, it's all nonsense because there are no emissions. Of course, there are emissions. The emissions are in China coming out of a coal-fired power plant. That's where the emissions are. And actually, if you
That's
take that,
true. That's true.
if you take that $10,000 dollar car, actually, what's the actual cost of that? How sustainable is that? The battery will probably coming out of China, etc., etc. So there's,
Well, yes. Actually, apart from battery, everything else is built in India. So
yeah,
battery is coming from China.
and that's because basically a car, electric
That's
vehicles.
Tata Motors. I don't know if they're selling cars in UK as well.
What? Who's that? Sorry.
Tata Motors.
Yeah, Tata. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, no, Tata are a smart company. I like Tata. Yeah, they own Jaguar Land Rover, I think, still.
Correct. Correct.
But so I think if you look, I mean, because basic electric vehicles are battery on wheels, there's nothing else to it. It's a very simple device. The other problem with electric vehicle is because it's simple, there's very little differentiation. So it's a race to the bottom as well. There's very little way to differentiate your electric vehicle versus anybody else's. And with a petrol vehicle,
I'm curious. So, what is the alternate? Are you saying just stick with the fossil fuel
no, I'm not saying that.
till
No.
how
I'm
long?
just saying that each country has its own individual strategy that fossil fuels should play a part of, including heavy goods vehicles as well. And actually, marine is a big issue as well. I've discovered marine is a large polluter that needs to be addressed. So we need to reduce emissions, but there's a way of doing that without trashing our economies, Nanju. At the moment, we're going to trash our economies. That's my concern.
Right.
In terms of my books, the other one is why can't we stop? So we've touched a bit on this about why can't we stop, because of the echo chambers. So who do you speak to? Who's challenging your thinking? Yeah, who's challenging my thinking?
Most people tend to create people around them who don't challenge them.
Exactly.
Let's get to be a peaceful environment. We both agree with each other and we like each other's company.
Exactly, and that's unfortunately not. We've got some difficult problems to fix, and actually, you cannot fix difficult problems like that. And the other one is why can't we get out of the bubble? So why can't we stop, and why can't we break out of this? And then you've got the pathology of technology, which is how does technology fuel this? So there's
no, but in some senses, technology helps you break out of this situation, right? I mean, at least you're exposed to new thoughts, new ideas.
Well,
I mean, different from your echo chambers that you.
Yeah, I'm talking about the psychology of the tech. So I'm talking about the communication and the way the communication on social media, for example, tends to gravitate towards.
Yeah, there also you tend to get into the echo chambers too.
And so that's the sort of technology I'm talking
about.
Is
it difficult to break out of it?
Yeah, it's almost, well, you're addicted. Addiction, right? You need to legislate. In my view, addiction's a really big problem because the definition. Do you know what the definition of addiction is?
Please go ahead.
It's when you lose control of yourself, right? And so the most obvious example is heroin addiction or alcohol addiction, which is typically a serious medical condition, and yet the level of addiction to technology and social media and this, not this type of input, but the sort of input when we get off this call and start doing whatever we're doing in our echo chambers, that is unbelievably addictive, and it ought to be regulated. And I think the other thing is as well, when I look at, you asked about when I look at companies, what do I think? The first question really is it compelling? Does it add any value? Or is it just trashing another business model? And also there are some good businesses that their source of revenue is not directly related to what they're good at doing. Okay. So for example, there's a business called Starling Bank, which actually has quite most fintech businesses, I think they're a waste of time, but Starling Bank is actually quite good, but their main sort of revenue is not the value-adding services. It was based upon interest rates, right? So they were giving away most of their services and they're making the money on interest rates, which of course the last X amount of years has caused them a huge problem. So it's very important that your profitability is linked to your core values. So if you want to sell something to me, Nanju, or I want to sell something to you, then it has to be, the price of that has to be related to what I'm good at doing or what I'm selling, as opposed to something else. If I said,
Tom, let me just give you a quick thing about one of the things I'm doing, right? I think, like I mentioned to you earlier, that I'm in the blockchain business, and one of the things we're doing is also we got into blockchain training because when we got started 2.5 years ago, we had almost 3 years ago, very less resource in blockchain. So we thought we need to develop more blockchain resource.
Yeah.
So we thought we should ideally give the course free, because we looked up, there were a few people who are offering blockchain courses. They were very expensive.
Yeah.
We thought at that cost, there'll be very few people who will be getting into blockchain.
Yeah.
So we thought we should do it free. But if we have to do it free, somebody has to pay for it.
Yeah.
So what we did, we reached out to a blockchain technology company
Yeah.
and said, we will build a developer community for you.
Yeah.
So you pay us so much, and we design this program and we deliver it to the students across hundreds of engineering colleges.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we did that. We signed up. It was a good money. They also agreed. So it was also money, and it was also we were achieving what we wanted to do, creating resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
But unfortunately, last year, the Ukraine war started, and the blockchain technology companies don't pay you in dollars or pounds. They pay you in crypto, their own coins,
Oh, right. Okay.
right? And we have to exchange it to dollars or rupees, whatever.
Yeah.
So we agreed on certain dollar value, and we got started. We received a very small advance because they said they will pay at this stage,
Yeah.
right? So we got started with the work, and the war started. The Ukraine war started,
Right.
Ukraine-Russia war, and then America. The conversation started happening that Russia will start using crypto and Bitcoin and all, and the
Yeah.
Bitcoin fell, crypto fell.
Yeah.
So the dollar value of our agreement from their crypto value, what we were getting paid out of, it fell almost to one-fourth of the price what we from a
Wow.
dollar value at the time of signing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they had to pay 4 times the price to us
Yeah. Wow.
from their point of view.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they stopped the contract.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and effectively we could not even get through with our invoices that we had already raised.
Yeah.
So almost $200,000 just went out of thin air for me.
Yeah.
Right. So we developed these things, we got started, and everything stopped. So now I have a training program. I don't want to charge.
Yeah.
And we continue to do it. So many of my friends said that don't do it, stop it here.
Yeah.
Why do you want to take the work? But the rest of the need is same. We still need resources. So we continue to build training programs.
Yeah.
And we thought first we will go directly to colleges and offer at a very small price.
Yeah.
We didn't get takers for it. So finally what we are doing now is we are putting the whole program free.
Okay.
So you do the course, you get it free, you take the certificate. We have a product called VeriChain, which is a verification tool.
Yeah.
So wherever you apply for a job, you need to verify, or the employer has to verify whether your certificate is genuine.
Right.
There, you got to pay for it.
Okay. Right. Okay.
So I know. So
I think.
sometimes we have to come around things.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just can't make money out of what you do.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I was looking at that, I mean, one, I'm really concerned about cryptocurrency and its value. I don't think cryptocurrency actually has any value per se. So that contract would have really concerned me. I guess the other side of that is it's actually Jeff Bezos that actually says that your source of profit is what's difficult to replicate. So in that situation, I'd imagine your program would be top notch. But what's difficult to replicate is not the unique selling proposition, because some USPs can be very simple to replicate. And actually, if it's not difficult if it is difficult to replicate, so I guess there's something about your service and your program and your ability to bespoke it to the clients, which is very special. And I think if people are in a situation where they're giving away their core business, and so I challenge you on that, Nanju, if I may, that if you could be giving away your core business there, albeit your source of revenue, it might be because when I ever do business with anybody, I always charge the money up front, right? Because that qualifies the relationship, and it professionalizes that relationship before I do anything whatsoever. So I'm always very concerned about giving away things free of charge. And I've seen a lot of businesses create a precedent like you just described. It's very difficult to go back and sell your courses if you've given them away. And so
I agree. I don't think I can ever go back and charge a fee for it unless right now this whole thing is free if it is done online.
Yeah.
If you want me to send my people to physically send to your place,
yeah,
and do a physical training, that's at a premium price.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
and I
this
think
is, see, for me, it's all pre-recorded, so it's a one-time cost.
Yeah. And I think,
So,
I agree. I think the difficulty with this as well. I mean, if you take a lot, some of the banking models, they're fueled upon generating a lot of customers by giving away a lot of free services and trashing their own markets. And then what happens
mhm.
is another competitor comes in. I mean, there's companies like Revolut and Monzo who operate in this sort of space, and Starling Bank, and and then they start and they can't charge because somebody else will come in behind and give away
No,
that service.
see, my need here is that I'm not trying. See, I didn't start this training to make money out of it, essentially. We needed
Okay.
to do this because we need to create more. See, blockchain is not just cryptocurrency,
No, no.
right? Blockchain is
Yeah, I agree. It's
has a
transaction, yeah.
huge impact, and there is so much more out of it. And we need quality resource coming out of it.
Yeah, yeah,
And there is a good opportunity for us to create more jobs out of here in blockchain, because we actually have 50% of the population is below 35.
yeah, yeah,
We don't have enough jobs happening.
yeah. But I guess, but
And
yeah, I get that.
today, internet is everywhere. People can sit in any remote place. They don't have to come to Bangalore or Bombay or Delhi to get a job. They can sit in their own hometowns, villages, a small town.
Yeah,
They can be on internet, because today one good thing is in India, infrastructures have improved significantly. Good roads,
yeah,
connectivity, telephone connectivity, internet.
yeah,
So people can pretty much sit and work out of anywhere.
yeah. I guess the just come back to that point. Maybe I mean, if companies find themselves giving away services, they've got to challenge themselves. What is their core business and what's difficult to replicate? How can they make money in the future? Because I think this is one of the
Yeah,
problems that,
the core of my business would be obviously building products and applications in the blockchain.
yeah,
So for
great.
me, I'll get resources out of here.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the idea of so this is not the core from a point of business.
yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, 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 got it. Um, so, and I think there's some psychology that sits behind that as well, which is certainly in the UK, there's a sort of pump and dump mentality to grow these businesses, fuel their valuations, without ever
Oh,
really any sign
we
of
have
taking
biggest of Indian brands have actually done that. You must be familiar with Reliance.
with which one?
Reliance,
Reliance. Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. I've heard about that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
they are one of the biggest. I think he's the chairman of Reliance Group is probably the third richest man in the world,
Yes.
or fourth.
Yeah, yeah.
Modi, what's his name? Ambani, Mukesh Ambani. You must be familiar with him.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've heard about that. Yeah. So I think
So
there's
they actually did what you said, pump and dump, right? They flooded the market at the
yeah,
lowest cost.
yeah,
So there was no going back from there.
yeah. So I think that, again, coming back to what does good look like, I think it's very important. The two references I think that leaders should operate around is profit and relationships. Profit. If you can make a profit, it's sanity, Nanju. It's sanity. It's the only thing. How on earth can you do due diligence on a company if it doesn't make a profit? And I think the other side of that is beware of people that are going to make profit in the future, because I think businesses should make a profit from the start. Largely, when you've got something, if you should always be able to sell it to someone for a profit. And there are a lot of people who are scaling broken business models where they're scaling something that's never going to make a profit, and definitely Revolut is one of those where the transactional costs are greater than the revenue, and they've just been increasing losses.
Well, I agree with you, Tom, on that. I'm also part of many startup ecosystem. We talk about it to startups that you need to be focused on profits. But don't you think historically, if you look at it, I remember I was in a business of consulting on setting up a virtual private network, that very VSAT,
Yeah, yeah,
that very small aperture terminal for satellite connection to establish a virtual private network. Of course,
yeah,
this was before the terminology of VPN, because VPN happened post 2000, and this was in the 90s. So we used to call intranet with internet a VSAT as a backbone. But
yeah,
those days, we used to talk about return on investment is over next 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years, depending on the size of your business.
yeah, yeah,
And it was accepted, right? There were a lot of investments, like even mobile companies, when they came in putting up towers, it was talked about that the return on this is over 15 years,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So many in fact, even the nuclear power plants, right? This
Yeah,
is going to be over 65 years to make profits out of a power plant.
yeah.
So, why is it that suddenly we want immediate profits?
Well, it's sanity. It's because it's
See,
sanity. So
some businesses, yes, profits at a unit level, but some businesses you need to have a long tail, right? It's only fair because that
yeah.
kind of infrastructure, that whole
Oh yeah,
approach
no,
demands
capital.
that, right?
So yeah, but I guess it. Coming back to the electric vehicle situation, if you look at the total infrastructure investment costs, right,
Right.
as a total of the efficiency of electric vehicles, the zero carbon aspects, the energy consumption of them, etc., you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it, right? And so, because right, the return on capital, well, it's basically loss. It's loss making, and people will not be able to afford it. But of course, if you have a power station, or if you're going to build a long-term investment, I mean, this water power project I'm working with at the moment, it's a 2.5 billion pound project,
Okay.
and of course, it's not going to make a profit on day one, right? But that there's a very clear, there's two customers for the power that have been secured already. There's a very clear environmental aspect to it, very positive, very good for the community, generates a lot of work. It does all of those things
Mhm.
on the top seven. That's a sustainable business. And then the
Mhm.
question is, how can you deliver that program, which is going to take 5 years to deliver, and who are the partners you're going to work with to achieve that? So of course there is, but it's about managing each stage of those projects. And I think when you look at it at the right level of detail, you can see that yes, that's going to work. If you've got the right team around it, right experience. I think when you look at a lot of these technology projects, they're actually trashing their own market, or they haven't got sufficient. What they're doing is not sufficiently difficult to replicate, so that somebody else can come in behind them and kill them. Or an electric vehicle is the same. And that unfortunately plays to, because there's not much differentiation with electric vehicle. It's a battery on wheels largely. And in fact, I think it's quite interesting actually, because I launched Kodak into Europe, Kodak Digital into Europe, which is an unmitigated disaster. If you ever look at that project, and it's because the branding was wrong, because Kodak were a premium brand, but they were never associated with digital. And the players who operated in that space were utilitarian Tesla type companies.
Mhm.
They weren't premium type companies. So when you went to go and buy the product, you would not look for Kodak, and it never sold, Nanju. And I think we've got the same issue with electric vehicles. I think the perceived upmarket value of a BMW or a Mercedes will not be translated into a electric vehicle. I don't think they're going to sell them for the same reason, because it's effectively a utilitarian product. I think Tesla have got a sort of coolness to them and tech side, which is quite attractive. And I think there's Tata who will produce vehicles, utilitarian vehicles, to suit a certain market. So I think that's an example of a market where, frankly, there's never going to be any money in it ever. And there's in a market like that, then who actually wins in those markets? It's players like China, because those markets tend not to fit Western investment models. Whereas
Oh, well, in India, in fact, there are efforts driven to set up battery manufacturing plants also here.
yeah,
There are already, like I mentioned earlier, two companies which are getting started. They are into repurposing of batteries, right? You take the
yeah,
batteries from the cars and
yeah,
repurpose them to two-wheelers, because India is the largest two-wheeler market.
yeah, okay, yeah,
So, and electric bikes, motorbikes, electric
yes,
motorbikes are very big in India.
yeah. No, that
In
I think
fact,
they're all
there are.
good. I think they're all good products. I think the other side of it actually is recycling. I think again, repurposing batteries is one thing. I don't think that's going to be hugely successful. I think the bigger, more I think in some ways you're pushing the problem down the road, repurposing batteries. And there's still significant problems with fire risk with lithium batteries, that the longer it goes on, the more chance there is of having a fire. So I think, that there's a more pressing need to design batteries to be recycled.
Oh no, we had some situation with some bikes catching fire, but it was more a design issue. It is true that lithium-ion batteries get heated faster, so the design has to be such to make sure that they cooler fast as well. So the problem was more with the bike design. It was,
Yeah,
I
there's
think,
a
Ola. I
there's
don't
a
know. I believe Ola is there in UK also now.
there's a fundamental problem with lithium batteries, though, which is the dendrites that form across and short out, and that will always happen unless you create a layer which prevents that from happening. There will always be
Right.
short.
So it was a design problem, but they fixed it. But
Yeah,
yes,
but there's
there
not
was an
this.
initial.
No, but this isn't. No, there's a fundamental problem that's not well publicized, which is the shorting out internally of batteries, which is a problem with the design and the process in electric and lithium battery manufacture, which I have seen no evidence of that problem being satisfactorily solved, unless it's very expensive. You can do it using graphene, but it's just too prohibitively expensive. So there are there's some. So anyway, there's some. Yeah, I think there's some challenges with I think the bigger challenge is being able to recycle batteries, because the other thing that's going to happen is that lithium is going to run out. I've done this. I've figured out how much lithium there is on a planet, and actually when's it going to run out. Um, and there's
I don't know about it because see, I don't know if you're familiar. India found a huge lithium base in Jammu Kashmir,
okay,
the northern state, and just 2 days ago there was a huge source in Rajasthan as well, which is in the western border touching Pakistan.
yeah, yeah,
So,
that's good.
so
You've got your own
India has
lithium.
got two huge deposits. So it looks like India will become one more source of lithium batteries
That's good. Yeah, well,
uh,
it's great you've
in
got
the
your own
next few
source.
years.
At least you won't be reliant on China, which is great.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I think the other thing with this as well is ethics as well. And I think what we're witnessing is, the USA has always been the sort of policeman of the world, and the USA seems to have completely collapsed from an ethical perspective. And I think now I talked a bit about the economics. What the USA broadly have done is they've shut down their own oil manufacturing. They've started to import a lot of oil at huge cost to their balance of payments. And whilst I quite like Trump, I'm by no means a puritanical fan of Trump whatsoever. But one of the points he makes is that if the USA had actually carried on developing their own oil reserves, they wouldn't have to import any oil. Now, there's this puritanical view that we need to just stop pumping oil, which is just disastrous, because and you can see the implications of that. It's causing an absolute, in part, it's causing an absolute crisis from an inflation perspective, which is causing them to put the interest rates up, which is trashing their banking system. And now we have 2.5 trillions worth of bad debt or value lost in the US, which is about 10 times the loss that took place in 2008, right? So I talked about the financial implications of this ideology, right? We are witnessing that now, okay? It's very real. So what and this is without even the infrastructure. We're not putting any of the grid infrastructure in whatsoever. So beware of this. And I think, beware of ideology. Ideology, if the viewers of this take away nothing apart from this one point, ideology creates tyranny, right? Because it becomes impossible to argue against eventually.
Well, your UK economy is significantly intertwined with US, right? So you will have a huge repercussion of the American economy's current situation, right?
Well, the UK economy is in real trouble, I think. If you just take the automotive industry, I mean, there are certain critical industries. Automotive in the UK is critical. It employs 800,000 people. And for the sake of our emissions are about 0.1% from vehicles globally. And if we implement the zero carbon ideology in the UK, it saves about 0.001% of global emissions for the sake of 800,000 jobs in the UK, Nanju, right? And for what benefit? Actually, I don't think we're going to, I mean, one, we're not going to be able to afford those vehicles when I look at it in the UK for the reasons I've described.
So where would you focus on zero carbon if you were to do that? Not an automobile, where else then?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to get some perspective on this, and I'll give you a biblical perspective to start off with, because hubris is a very big problem, right? Hubris, and Jesus actually said, he said, look, you look after the planet and I'll fix the planet, right? Now that is a very important delineation, and you may or may not be a Christian, I don't know, but it's a very important delineation that we look after the planet and Jesus fixes the planet. Because the minute you thinking you can fix the planet, it's just beyond, it's just bizarre. You get involved in carbon capture, which is insane. If you look at carbon capture, we won't talk about that now, I hope, but it's utterly insane for a whole variety of reasons. The first thing is to protect wealth, right, Nanju, right? So you've got to protect your economy, because unless you've got money to spend, right, and more money to spend, and it's more, not less, you're not going to be able to afford this infrastructure and everything else, right? There's a few exceptions like Norway, which have got their own perfect power supply, hydroelectric and everything else, in a very wealthy country, and the citizens are very wealthy. But mainly, even in the UK, there's a very segmented population, probably not as extreme as India, but it's similar, where a lot of people will not be able to afford electric vehicles, right? In terms of the capital expenditure or even the running costs. So the first thing is to protect wealth. The second thing, I think, is to protect the natural systems, which we're not doing, like the rainforest. And in the UK there are peat bogs and other such things. We need to protect those. Those are the main source of absorbing carbon, as well as addressing the third on the list. I think is probably China, taxing them for the 30% of carbon emissions burning coal, which is just a monumental disaster. Probably India actually as well. If most of your power comes from coal, that should be really
almost 47% is coal.
Yeah, so that there ought to be some real focus on that. I think the third one, which is related to the first one, is protecting economies from climate change. So take Bangladesh, which is below sea level. If that economy it gets flooded, or Pakistan, they get flooded quite frequently. Those people are not going to care about the environment until they've got somewhere they can live, that their business doesn't get washed away every 5 minutes. So there's and if you take Holland, actually, Holland is an example of this, where they have actually built sea defences, and it's almost impossible to live in Holland, technically from a water sea level perspective. But that is a major source of money. So effectively, what the UK government should do specifically, for example, is invest in Bangladesh, not in electric vehicles in the UK, in my view, right? So that's how bizarre, in terms of priorities, are messed up in my estimation. So countries with the money, right, should invest in the countries that don't have the money to support their economies, right? And the other bizarre thing is, to grow their economies, they'll need more oil. So during this period, when you look at this, you'll need more oil consumption to build the infrastructure, because oil is a major raw material. And so that's a sort of top level perspective on what's going on, I think. And within that, we've got the antithesis of that is really quite disturbing. We've got the UK strategy, which is centered around electric vehicles, hydrogen, which is even worse than electric vehicles, which I can bore you with incessantly, and carbon capture, which is utterly insane. So those are the three technologies, all three of which will trash our economy.
We had Paul Martin. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's Canadian. he is one of the biggest voices, loud voices against hydrogen in automobiles.
Yeah.
So we had a podcast. So I think
Right. I'd like to see that. Yeah. It's
I'll share that. I urge the audience to look it up and
yeah. No,
go for
great.
that. And also all the books that Tom mentioned, we have the links for them below this podcast. So please do look up.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. So if you take hydrogen, right, again, the psychology of it, green hydrogen, and green hydrogen is not green because the energy has to come from somewhere, Nanju. Right. So
Right.
if you look at it end to end, I think zero carbon is what matters. And actually, the model I use for EVs is just looking at energy, full stop. Right. So then you can say, right, this is how much energy something consumes. And then you can ask the question, where does that energy come from? Right. And there's two separate issues. And then you've got level playing field. But when you start talking about green hydrogen, it doesn't there's not enough power in the whole planet to produce hydrogen for a start. One of the big issues is energy security, the cost of hydrogen. The cost of hydrogen currently is 5 times diesel. It's just insane currently, and it's not going to come down because the physics of hydrogen is the physics of hydrogen. It requires, do you know, to liquefy hydrogen, do you know what temperature you have to cool it to?
I don't remember. Yeah, but
It's minus 270 degrees centigrade. Absolute zero when everything stops is minus 273, right?
right. And they're bulky as well. Even after compression, it's still bulky.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And
the voluminous, so it takes a lot of space.
yeah,
Still.
and it costs more to produce the electric vehicle. The carbon
Right,
footprint
and
is
the
worse.
conversion rate also gives you far lesser energy.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So it's
yep.
just absurd. So the psychology of it, like green hydrogen, is very
No,
misleading.
but funnily, you mentioned Toyota. Toyota is betting big on hydrogen.
Well, yes, although I think Toyota are bigger on hybrids. I don't think hydrogen's going to work. It's very interesting that is.
No, they are big on hybrid, of course, but now their new CEO spoke about it that they are betting big on hydrogen vehicles. They have also initiated 1,000 or 1,200 hydrogen fueling centers across Japan.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're starting now because they're launching the car. They're doing a Corolla version of hydrogen, so they're actually coming into economy segment.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the current model is Mirai, which is a premium segment. So they're
yeah,
coming with a Corolla, which is going to be a economy version, and which they are also likely to bring to India next, naturally, because India is the biggest
yeah, yeah,
market. And Indian Minister for Road Transport is talking big about hydrogen.
yeah.
So
Well, I think
I don't know how
I'll
the
just
whole
say
realistic.
it's quite possible that, I mean, I've seen this, so it's quite possible that even companies like Toyota can be completely usurped with ideology, okay? And governments. This is what we're witnessing at the moment. So it's a separate discussion to look through that. I have looked at it a bit about what Toyota are doing with hydrogen, but from what I understand, for the perspectives of total energy, right? Amount of energy to create hydrogen versus energy out. Where does that energy come from? It and storage and a whole, the cost of them. It's worse than electric vehicles, but maybe we park for that for the moment. I think I agree in terms of nuclear power. I think that's absolutely critical. There's been a lot of lobbying against nuclear power, but all of a sudden it's the most sensible thing that's going on at the moment. Sea power, I think, is underutilized. Wind, lesser so. I don't think we really want to cover the
When you
whole
say sea, you mean tidal?
tidal. Yeah, sorry, tidal power. Yeah.
Okay.
Wind, I don't think we want to cover the whole planet with windmills or solar panels.
Uh, any thoughts on this blue hydrogen, as they refer to it?
It's no,
The methane in the sea, and
well, yeah. Blue hydrogen. Yeah, I mean, I when I started Zero Carbon, we took methane and we cracked it to hydrogen and high value, high spec graphene. That process is quite interesting because what you get is you get roughly the same thermal value of you get the same thermal value, more or less about 10% by converting the methane to hydrogen. So you can burn that, but it burns. Doesn't burn like gas. Hydrogen explodes. It go. It's like
No, but there is some school of thought, or there's some set of people who talk about blue hydrogen is better than green hydrogen. So from
well,
that respect,
let me just explain. But the way to give you an idea of the hybrid aspect of this, to make this work, you have to use the graphene for something productive to reduce consumption. So one of the main things you can do is materials engineering to make things last longer. So when I said, so you put graphene in concrete, for example, and you use less concrete, but you've got to charge more money for it, because what happens when you put graphene in concrete, it nucleates around the graphene molecules, and it actually sets faster and it's stronger. So you can actually reduce, and concrete is it's 8% of global CO2 is concrete, well, through making cement. So that's a really big issue. And there's no real replacement for cement that anybody's found. So the materials engineering aspect of it is really important. So, and that feeds into reducing consumption, but also charging more for things. So beware, all of these things require a business model change. So if you're selling concrete in that way, you have to sell it. It's antithesis what you were saying in terms of your blockchain giving it away. You've got to have somebody actually buy it for more money. And obviously with tires as well, you can put graphene in tires, they last longer, but somebody's gonna have to pay more for tires. Are you going to spend £250 per tire or £1,000 when your car, you might only keep your car for 2 years, or I don't know, whatever. But so these are real big. So when you start changing aerospace industry is very good at materials engineering, making things last forever. So the point I'm making is, this is an example. I was talking about the hybrid strategy, Nanju,
right.
and in its entirety, it does, but you have to use the offtake, both offtakes, the hydrogen and the graphene, to make the overall system work. Otherwise it's about net percent loss in energy, net 10% loss in energy. That's one fairly useful bit of technology, but most of this technology doesn't really make that much difference to zero carbon. I think the main things we should be doing is protecting our economies, reducing consumption, protecting third world economies which are affected by climate change. They're really the things we must do. Taxing, penalizing people who burn, China, who burn coal, and also India, I'm afraid to say, as well. So I think, and UK government strategy, you talked about Toyota strategy being all over the place. I think UK government strategy is all over the place, because EVs, hydrogen, carbon capture is just it's very
even UK is
problematic.
talking about hydrogen.
What was that? Sorry?
UK is also talking about hydrogen.
Oh yeah, UK is very big on hydrogen. Yeah,
Okay.
it's bonkers.
Oh yeah, you have some buses powered by hydrogen cell powered buses.
Yeah. But there's a lot of investment into companies. The UK is quite good.
Even here, Tatas have launched a hydrogen cell powered buses. I think somewhere in India. It was flagged off by the very same minister I mentioned. So
yeah,
they're talking about more hydrogen cell powered buses in India as well.
Yeah, there are some very limited applications for hydrogen where I think it's worthwhile. One is heating steel, because what it does is because it explodes, it doesn't burn. It breaks up the surface tension and improves the conductivity when you're heating steel. But everything else, it's a pain. It leaks. It's impossible to store. It's very expensive to produce. It's very expensive to buy. It's not secure as a supply source. And anything that the hydrogen fuel cells are very expensive to make. And they don't achieve that zero carbon utopia. They actually create quite a lot of, well, not quite a lot of pollution. That's probably something that can be improved on, but they do also create pollution. They don't just produce water. So I think the thing to watch for this as well is that from these strategies we're talking about, it's very important that we level up the wealth divide as well. So the difficulty with having sort of a big wealth divide is that you create tyranny, because when one part of the population becomes less wealthy and the other part of the population becomes more wealthy, and that disparity improves, the only way to control the people who haven't got money is democracies get usurped by that. So the importance of creating jobs and wealth at all levels throughout society is absolutely critical. And I think for sure China's view of the Industrial Revolution 4 is very narrow, which is to control the population. And that's something that's, we really need to fight against, in my view.
What do you say about Zero Carbon Fund? What do you do there in Zero Carbon Fund? This is Dubai based, right?
What was that? Say that again, sorry.
That is Dubai based, the Zero Carbon Fund.
So
that you
I founded a business in the UAE called Zero Carbon Ventures, and effectively what that business does is it takes technology, and the UAE are running COP28, and it creates showcases in the UAE. So if you take methane's a very big challenge with oil manufacturing, because oil manufacturing gives off a lot of methane. So this machine that I described, taking methane, converting it to hydrogen and graphene, is a very attractive process. So we set up that pilot, we funded that pilot, we created the showcase, we get the customers around it, and then we roll it out to actually make some substantial difference to different very direct challenges in the UAE. And the UAE is a very interesting place. They're actually leading on climate change. They're very progressive. They're very ambitious. Ambition is very important. And the challenge in the UAE is completely different, because in the UK it's relatively cold. It's about keeping things warm. In the UAE it's about keeping heat out of buildings. So it's about air conditioning efficiency. So we introduced some technologies around air conditioning efficiency to again showcase, so effectively to fund that transition and build the right partners. Because what happens in a lot of these situations is there are some and also commercializing. So we took this technology. I was CTO and chaired this business, and the critical thing, this business that we set up, it was actually in the Economist magazine. It got a lot of publicity. But we took this technology from Cambridge, and because I've got a very capable technology team, we commercialized this project, which had been in development for 10 years in about 6 weeks. So we commercialized it to make it safe and contain it and tie up all the loose ends and get some proper process control in a super fast timescale to then move it to the UAE. So you're managing different levels of risk and augmenting the team to make these transitions happen seamlessly as possible, and also making sure the accountability for the contractors with the supplier. But the one major differentiator with these projects was, guess what it was, Nanju? Guess what the one main differentiator with these technology projects was? Making a profit.
So, but you funded it. I mean, the fund, is that a social fund then? Is that an impact fund where you fund it?
It's a UAE centric fund. So it's a UAE centric fund. So it's based upon
who's backing it. I mean, their intention is only to explore this kind of idea.
They're basically bringing these technologies into the UAE.
Right, but they're still far from sustaining, right? I mean, you, from a business point of view.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Middle East have got some huge challenges, and they're very proud people. So they've really got an ambition to resolve these issues and develop their economies away from oil. So it's a 30-year, and it's a 40-year project. This is to make the transition away from oil. So the UAE are very keen on, doing what they can to lead in this space, to take their economies away from oil and build, sustainable
So
infrastructure.
all this money is part of, I mean, trying to figure out and explore and hopefully hit on something big in the future.
Well, but it's also about managing risk. So it's about raising relatively small amounts of money to make
Oh, is
profit.
it? Okay.
Yeah, so relatively small amounts of money per project to set up a showcase. So you're talking of hundreds of thousands of pounds, not millions of pounds. Okay,
Okay.
set up a showcase.
So
And
who are these guys who come and set up a showcase? I mean, they from
they're from
businesses you
the right partners in the
anyway.
UAE. So the
Oh,
government,
okay.
UAE government, oil companies, people like that. So they're all, there are lots of organisations like ADNOC. There are
So it's not
industrial.
like UK companies going there and setting up, or you basically help those local
Yeah,
guys to
we're providing an
build.
infrastructure. So if you were a technology supplier in the UK, we would take your product and showcase that in the UAE
Okay.
to
Okay.
fix a problem. Okay, and we'd provide the
Mm.
industrial partners to implement that and
Right.
integrate that
Right.
into the UAE infrastructure and fund it. Okay,
Right.
and come up with a commercial model to make that happen and make sure the accountability. So you're accountable for your technology, and there's a contract that said, look, you supply these things, and we'll
Yeah.
find the route to market. And the other thing about this is it's a relatively small amount of money. If it doesn't work, you can stop it, right? So
Okay.
um, so some projects, a lot of projects should be stopped or refined. So if you take graphene, for example, graphene is a very long-term project in aerospace, concrete, a lot of certification, a lot of long time frame projects. So, but the focus, the main focus was the offload for the graphene. And if you're making a profit, right, Nanju, it requires a lot less money to get, because you're generating cash, which funds itself. It sounds like utopia, but it's so obvious. If your focus is on profit, which it is, you need to rate, so developing that, launching
Good.
that business and actually creating a very valuable business with very small investment. What enabled that was our focus on making profit.
So who do you think are doing something in this zero carbon space that are you think are really worthwhile to follow and are likely to make significant impact in the future?
Yeah, I think good question. Sadly, I think some of the things I've just talked about, like protecting places like Bangladesh, I think there are some projects going on there which are really very resourceful and very interesting. They're building, a lot of it's around building and to protect the environment. So I think that's not without hope, but we really should be focusing more on that. I think the main things are creating indigenous sustainable industries around electric vehicles. So we talked about electric batteries for vehicles, lithium-ion batteries. It's about taking your model in India, Nanju, and making that work using your own lithium, focusing on making a profit, considering the infrastructure, getting the right partners together to get that decision making right.
It may be about 3 years away. Yeah, 3 to 5 years at best.
Yeah, but it's about getting the right quorum together and actually doing it on your terms, okay? And which is very difficult thing to do. So you be literally attacking you to make sure you don't succeed, or they will attack you at a time of their choosing. So if you look at the way China operate, I mean, compatible personal computers. Do you remember that? I don't know how old you are, but in one blow, they killed the PC industry because Lenovo had 10 years worth of development on a PC, and they dropped the price by 30% and killed the industry. They killed IBM overnight. They'll do the same thing with electric vehicles. In fact, they're already doing that. They're reducing the pricing already. And what's interesting is they're attacking so early because they've forced Tesla to reduce their pricing by $9,500. And I'm
Right.
absolutely sure they'll kill Tesla. And their ambitions, and they've got, because they don't play by the Marcus of Queensberry
No,
rules.
Tesla is quite a good or ahead at technology, right? Is it that
Yeah, but
easy to kill Tesla?
they still play by the Marcus of Queensberry rules. And China will hit them in the same way they'll hit them like IBM. IBM were a good business, but
Correct.
they will just destroy the market, and they've got the ability to destroy the market, and with a view to, you know, the profitless growth models, which we cannot compete with. So I think it's, so to answer your question, I think these industries are hybrid. There's a national strategy per country. The one for the UAE was completely different to the one for India, completely different for one for the UK, completely different challenges. I think there needs to be what we created was a investment infrastructure to process the technology and evaluate the technology and scale the technology and get the right partnerships on board. That's what we created in the UAE, and that's what India needs. It's what the UK needs. It needs a central infrastructure that is technologically and investment focused to make these things happen. Otherwise, you get a whole raft of stupid ideology and projects that will go nowhere. Or you'll find
Right.
people saying, yes, well, the guy, I mean, this investment panel, he said, there's a guy that said to me, on sitting next to me, he's a professor. He wasn't a stupid guy at all. He said, we need the government to subsidize hydrogen so it's cheaper than diesel. No, you cannot do that. You've got to make sure it's not a sustainable thing to do. And physically, it's just impossible to do. So it's very important to get the strategy right to launch industries in a way that generates wealth in India, Nanju. Otherwise, we're on a route to nowhere, and that's quite a difficult thing to do. I think it said about hybrid strategies. So electric vehicles do play a part, but so do fossil fuels. So it's about reducing ideology. It's also about upending, litigious, some of the litigious stuff. So a lot of the legislation is very ideological. I think that because it's going to fail, because the EV only strategy is going to fail, it'll force legislators to actually adopt electric vehicles. Fossil fuels. And I'd like to see more investment in foreign countries. We've got to look after the rainforest. We've got to reduce consumption. But actually, a lot of this coming back to my cycling business, a lot of this stuff actually you can do at grassroots level. Every time you buy something, Nanju, you can ask yourself the question, you and I individually take total responsibility in buying this. Do I need to buy it? Can I fix the thing I've got? Do I, and I live in a very wealthy part of the UK. Everybody's got new cars. I've got 20-year-old Volkswagen TDIs, right? And I'm proud of them, okay? And I don't need anything else. I was offered a Tesla. I would not want a Tesla, right? I would not want a Tesla because, it's actually going to make my carbon footprint an awful lot worse, because my 20-year-old Volkswagen TDIs are written off ages ago. The damage has been done in making them.
Right.
So,
But because they're so old, I think they'd be a little more hazardous from a point of they would be very old engine capacity, right? So they'd be pushing more hydrocarbons to the air.
well, not relatively speaking, it's probably 0.0 with 26 zeros, 1% of the UK. It's 5x or nothing, relatively
It's
speaking.
too small.
So we've got to get perspective. So it's, yes, of course, it's not the latest, but actually it's still high pressure fuel injection system, still very efficient engine. So it's not the absolute latest, but it's the difference between 50 miles to the gallon versus maybe 60 miles to the gallon. Emissions won't be quite so good, but it's so irrelevant, that gap. It's not saying that it shouldn't. I'm not saying it should be an inner city. I'm not saying that at all. I don't.
Are there businesses working on convertible kits for these kind of old cars, the traditional fossil fuel cars to become electric? Are there any businesses like that?
Not that I'm
Have you
aware
come
of.
across any?
Not that I'm well. I have actually. I mean, the ones I've come across, as it comes to economics. I mean, I've looked at one actually. Someone actually contacted me, a sports car manufacturer in the UK, looking to do
Oh,
exactly that. But the cost of doing that is fairly huge to get the
mm,
certification,
mm,
do the design, do all the engineering. So, but it just wouldn't make any sense whatsoever to do that because your carbon footprint would go through the roof just in buying the batteries. So
right,
it wouldn't make any sense because batteries are very much more integral part of the structure than they are anything else. So um,
right.
and also be extremely unsafe because you've got 800 volts sitting below your seat somewhere or maybe on your roof. So if you had an accident, I wouldn't want to be sitting in that car. The good chance the whole
Mm.
thing would go into a lithium ion inferno. So it's not my wouldn't be my focus. So
Well, Tom, I always ask my guests, are there people who influenced you in making you the way you think? Are there, I mean, somebody in the family, or teachers, your colleagues, or are there people who
yeah,
kind of influenced you in your thinking?
yeah. Um, I've always tried to do the
Because
right.
you're a business guy who's like an activist.
Yeah, I've always tried to do the right thing, Nanju. So there's always a cost in doing the right thing. I think I've always been courageous. I mean, my family are courageous people. My grandmother was unbelievably courageous. So I come from a pretty courageous background. In fact, my behind me is a picture of one of my relatives, which is he was a real engineering pioneer.
Oh,
So
you have a background, so you have a
I know,
different background. I can feel it.
yeah, exactly. So, but I come from a long line of industrialists.
Mhm.
Either work or they don't. Nanju. It's if you're making aircraft, you have to get it right. You can't not get it right because it falls out of the sky and someone gets killed. If you're making a car, the brakes have to work. You can't have a factory where components don't fit into the circuit board. They have to. It doesn't get to the end of the line. So there's a certain amount of rigor which I cut my teeth in, in the automotive industry in the UK, and it was exceptionally good. And there was no such thing as no. So I came from an environment where there was no such thing as no. They were very systematic, as well as being very aggressive from time to time to resolve
Mhm.
issues. So, and if you stop a car plant, it costs you a lot of money. It used to cost about £40,000 an hour if you stop a car plant. So the car plant would go bust in 2 or 3 hours. So that's a level of focus in terms of service. Um, in, in terms of, and at the time I worked for Lucas Automotive, and there's a few heroes in that business. I've got a guy called John Parnaby, who's I think dead now, but a great industrialist. Um, John Harvey Jones is another one who you might know the name of. A phenomenal bloke who had a certain moral compass, and it was sort of talked about the same sort of things like my top 7 about doing the right things for UK, doing the right things for people, generating wealth, making profit, you know, and I'm sure he'd turn in his grave if he saw a lot of the technology that was happening currently. Some of the parasitic technology which I described. So I think those are the sorts of influences, and I think I've also noticed I've seen a lot of businesses get into trouble or take shortcuts or take some steps that were never going to succeed. So I guess I've learned a lot from hands-on looking at businesses in a very short space of time to evaluate just like that whether or not I want to have anything to do with these businesses. So I do a lot of due diligence for venture capitalists, for example, and it doesn't take me more than half a day to really get to grips with whether or not the business is viable, whether or not the commercial
Well,
model
what
is.
kind of businesses would they be?
Everything, automotive businesses, manufacturing businesses, technology businesses, banking businesses, everything.
Oh, okay. Here, Tom. See, you obviously have a very strong opinion on electric vehicle, and your investor asks you to do a due diligence on an EV startup, electric vehicle startup. How would you approach it?
Yeah, good question. Making a profit and relationships. So if I look at set it. So for example, I looked at the economics of British Volt, and the one big question which they haven't resolved is how they're going to make a profit, right? So if you set up a big car plant, if you set up a big plant making batteries in India, how are you going to make a profit? Not now, but in 10 years' time or 5 years' time. And actually, is that industry going to be viable? And actually, what type of battery should you make? And I think that is a really difficult problem to fix at the moment, because there's so many different technologies in that space. It's very difficult to know which horse to back. So I think a lot of it's around collaboration, developing partnerships with people, and orchestration, and so to be an orchestrator, the company in the UAE we created, because we were very competent on a number of different levels, we could orchestrate, right? Because we knew what we were talking about. We had the experience to do it. Very difficult thing to do that. And because if you're moving into the automotive market, you have to orchestrate with the automotive OEMs. So you have to say, look, I will orchestrate this vendor base to supply you batteries, which is the most incredible hubris. So or competence, one or the other, in order to do that. And of course, Volkswagen currently are vertically integrating massively into the supply chain, so they're not going to do all that themselves. So how would you persuade Volkswagen to work with you to supply them electric batteries, for example, when they've got their own plan? So this is, I think, it's
incidentally, they are one of the players who are also getting into hydrogen.
Yes, yeah.
So maybe they're responding to the market where Toyota has made such big announcements, so these guys also have to keep up. I don't know, but that's another company who's also talking. But while they continue with the electric vehicle, they'll also be coming up with hydrogen fuel.
Yeah, I think, as far as I understand, the Toyota hydrogen model, it's for the top end vehicles.
Currently that Mirai, but
I think it's
what
best,
they have announced is for Corolla, which is the economy.
I don't see those economics at all. and I don't think I'm missing anything either. It sounds very unhealthy to say that, but the basic physics, I look at this from basic physics perspective, like storing hydrogen, etc. So these decisions are really critical to get right. So I think those are the sorts of decisions that are going to be made, and actually then you need a team of people. So I talked about the top 7, where you've got intimacy between a group of people to refine that decision making, because obviously things change, new technologies come on board, and so you've got new technologies which come on board. You've got to showcase this stuff, a bit like the UAE. You've got to get some results, get some profit as soon as you can, sell something to get to know that market intimately and develop relationships with customers who are actually selling things to customers. And so I think that's really critical. And it's the same with this hydropower project. And I think what's unique about the current situation is you need to look at this much more broadly, and you need to orchestrate much more widely, with far greater partners, including government, etc. So, because the amount of power as well that these battery plants use, the battery plant in Italy uses 3% of Italy's power, right? One battery plant, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so this is the sort of thing that people need to know. So that's a government related issue. Are they going to give you 3% of their power for your battery plants? Yeah.
Is there a published report on that or anything, or is there something available on any place that you have written an article about or books?
I've done a lot of analysis on this stuff, but I've got various different things, but these are the sorts of, all I'm doing is I'm just identifying some critical, some of the big numbers and some of the critical thinking, which often doesn't come out of these discussions. So these plants use vast amounts of power.
Right.
And so, EVs being, big
Right.
utopia, it's
Well,
the big implication. So
Tom, correct.
you orchestrate. So if you're setting up a battery plant in Italy, you've got to orchestrate with the government to give you 3% of the power, as well as all the other issues. And you need support from the government to keep China out as well. You need an industrial strategy to try and do that. Otherwise, you're going to have to be very smart to usurp China's technology. Because one thing I'm absolutely clear on is that you need to be very smart, very hybrid to win this game and actually deliver results. And I'm not suggesting at all that you keep China out and just develop a non-competitive industry. You need to earn that place. But so you need to be very switched on and very good at making things happen very, very fast. So if you take that project, going back to the UAE, we took some very relatively complex, relatively potentially dangerous technology, made that safe in about 2 months, which would have taken about 3 or 4 years. And if that had taken 3 or 4 years, that opportunity would have been squandered and that profit. But because we got the first plant into the UAE doing that, producing graphene, that's the first graphene plant in the UAE by a long way. And if we'd taken years, so speed is the main differentiator, Nanju. It's the ability for experienced people to look at a problem and say, either that's going to work or it's not going to work, or it's not going to work, not take any shortcuts. Because I think the unique thing about the world we live in now is that shortcuts are going to kill you. We don't have that.
That is, all this you're saying is good from a industry or entrepreneur or business side of it, right? But much of it is all coming from a response to the consumer needs and consumers' perspectives, right? There is a narrative built, people are buying. So, but how do you bring in a narrative of zero carbon, right? From a 360 degree, what you've been talking about. How do you make sure that a common man understands that? How do you get the story made available to everybody so that they start questioning, so that governments are not driven by lobbyists? So how do you make that happen?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think you have to start doing the right things, and you have to lead. You have to communicate consistently.
No, but they don't even realize that they're not doing the right thing, right? So how do you get this 360 degree view? Should we start from school? Where do we get this kind of a thinking that, okay, if I buy this iPhone, what are the things that go into it? Where do they come from? How are they made? Versus, okay, this is made in India, so it's good. So how do
you have to do it? You have to physically do it, Nanju. You have to physically create a business that demonstrates it. Okay, so I have about 5 different businesses that I just described to you, which are demonstrating this. Which are one very simple business, which has been very interesting, my cycling business. Second one is this wind-powered business. Third one is electric vehicles. Battery manufacturing. And you have to demonstrate this. You have to put this into practice. You have to, and the UAE business as well. So we've actually done this. We've actually demonstrated this because people like success, right? And they need people who are going to lead and make things happen. And it's only by demonstrating this and actually making things happen and getting this right that you actually make progress. And so, part of that as well is, I do a lot of talks as well. So I do speak at government events. I speak at all kinds of conferences and things. And I make myself really unpopular. So you've got to make yourself really unpopular, right? And people, the last talk I did, I made a list. I was listening to all the talks around hydrogen and electric vehicles, and I was going to rip the whole thing to pieces. But that would have been so indigestible for the audience. They could not have coped with that. It was like black and white. So what I thought I'd do, and I changed my speech just at the last minute, and without any preparation, I said I need to have to change this because people are not going to be able to digest. I talked about how did I actually address this in terms of getting the strategy at national level right in the UAE, or the draft of the strategy in the UAE, which is a whole raft of specific projects which fixing specific issues which are specific to the UAE and their challenges in a non-ideological way, taking into account all of these different factors, as well as doing some, as well as doing some analysis. So I've got some analysis which I'm happy to share with you. Which you can build the same model in India. It's relatively simple, but it's basically taking energy, right? So if you take the diesel, there's 1 billion cars on the, in fact, no, it does include, I did it for the whole world, but it takes 1 billion cars on the planet burning diesel, right? And it shows what's happening to the energy consumption, converting all of those vehicles to electric vehicles, right? And what's the material consumption? What are the big issues? And it's quite interesting that the diesel basically switches to 3 things. One is there's a vast amount of power making batteries, right? So if you look, there's about 30% making batteries. There's about 30% recycling lithium-ion batteries. We're going to have to recycling lithium-ion batteries. And in terms of one factor, right, that will cause business to succeed or fail in the lithium-ion market is designed for recyclability, right? So, and I said this going back to the British Volt, that need to design for recyclability. In fact, British Volt didn't set the bar high enough technologically to make sure this was going to happen. And then the third one is, what is it? Can't remember. There's another one, which is roughly a third of something else. So it basically, and it looks at energy, and then you can ask the question really simply. This is totally ideological free, right? So no one's saying green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, because that's all ideology, right? This is just pure energy. So then you can say, well, this is the energy required, and it's a vast amount of energy, right? There's a big transition. So all of that power, right, is switching from diesel, and that power has to come out the grid, right? Which is a huge amount of energy. It has to come out the grid. And that's where that very big figure comes from energy generation, which is nuclear and all these other investments in the grid and infrastructure, because the electric infrastructure, vast development, and that sort of creates at the top level. Then well, if you're going to win in this market, that's the sort of mindset you need to have. How am I going to address these problems? How can I design batteries? Does it need to be lithium ion? I don't honestly know the answer to this question. I'm not so tied into
So what battery technology are you working on for your own battery manufacturing?
Well, it's basically setting up a plant using hybrid different types of technology, with multiple different types of partnerships to get this decision making right. So not being
catering to which electronic consumer goods, or is it for
automotive?
Automotive. Okay.
So, but it's about creating the right infrastructure to enable your infrastructure to be able to be switched, let's say from a sodium battery to a lithium battery, right? Now,
so there's no other factory. You're building the first one in UK.
There's only one Chinese factory in northeast of England.
Oh, that's also Chinese, is it? Okay.
That's Chinese, yeah, which is very worrying. It's Envision factory. Envision's interesting. That was a Japanese company bought by the Chinese, and the Japanese absolutely hate the Chinese. So how on earth they ever let that happen, I'd have no idea. But yeah, it's but I think it shows the level of concern that the automotive industry has.
When will you be ready? When will your factory be ready to ship?
2025, I think, is the current plan.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's a lot of work doing these things that we've just talked about. And part of my role is to develop the team in the way I've just described, because the winning thinking program that I run is actually the summation. These books I've written, right? These books I've written, this one of them is related to EDI.
Can you hold it closer to you? Because of the backgrounds, we can't see. Yeah.
This is one around equity, diversity, inclusion, which is related to that. Yeah. This whole subject. It's one of the 5 books.
Well, Tom, how do you manage? You run 5 different businesses, different continents, right? And you also speak You evangelize a lot of these things, and you also write. You also cycle.
Yeah. I'm very selective. I say no a lot. I say no a lot, Nanju. I say no a lot, and I play to my strengths. Do you remember what I said to you was I spent my whole career making myself obsolete, right? So the main
Well,
the
I
main
think
thing is the main
that's a fantastic statement, because I think every business has to start with saying, what is the problem I'm solving?
yeah
And the ideal goal should be that I solve it to the extent that I should become obsolete, right? I should be trying to find a new problem to solve, but which
yeah.
doesn't happen. They want to
So
sustain the problem to solve
yeah,
it for it.
I've spent my whole career doing that. So that's the reason why. And my focus is to create my diary is clear. Not only I've made time for this call, and I appreciate this and I value this time. Because it's a good challenge to my own thinking. But my focus is to create my diary, to keep my diary as clear as possible, Nanju. Right. So because if you think about a leader, if a leader has no time, what use are they to anybody? Yeah. Totally useless. And also when it comes to company turnaround, my winning thinking program only takes about 3/4 of a day. And that delivers huge. I mean, I've just talked about some of the psychological aspects, which we haven't talked about in much detail. They're in my books. But that when you get the psychology of a team right, and you understand what's driving you, what's holding you back, then you fly. And so I used to spend 6 months turning companies around. Now I spend 3/4 of a day doing that, right? With leadership teams, because they can do it themselves. And I can go and then I can just provide remote support. And in the same way, when I take a board role, what's the best use of my time? So this tidal power business, what's the best use of my time? I don't, it's not a best use of my time to be CEO, but I propose that my role should be director of partnerships, to head up the partnerships, right? So what I'm talking.
So, Tom, can I ask you a question now? Just step back in your turnaround roles.
Yeah.
What are the three questions you ask? Don't have to have the answers to it, but just the three questions. I thought it may set a lot of people thinking, including me. So,
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the main question to ask, right, is
okay, yeah,
to
one question. Yeah.
the main question to ask, which is the starting point of everything. Well, I'll give you three questions. I'll give you
Okay.
three answers, if you like. But the main question to ask is, over the last 5 years, if you take your blockchain business, Nanju, whatever business you want to take, or another business, so what were the challenges you had, right, in that business, and what were the decisions you made? Okay.
Mhm.
Now, when I listened to the answer to that question, and I asked business leaders to walk through that, I can see that what's driven that business and the psychology, which has got it to where it's got to, right? So, for example, in your business, at some stage, you started to give away your blockchain. So that would be a big
Programs.
alarm.
Yeah.
That would be a big alarm bell to me, but I don't know the full journey. Okay, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but if I understood that journey, because then you can understand, I can see where you are, right, and what's the thinking that's driven you to where you've got to, and then the winning thinking program is about then how do you address that thinking or make people aware of that thinking, because very often people are not aware of what's driven them to get to where they've got to, right? Or they'll justify it to themselves. Say, well, everybody gives away blockchain trading or something like this, some statement like that, which justifies it in your own mind, which means you don't have to address it. Okay, so that's so that's the first question I ask. The second question I ask is around profit, funny enough. It's about looking at the business at a really top level. So where does your revenue come from? So in your business, Nanju, where does your revenue come from? What are the costs associated with direct costs, and what are the overheads, right? Give me your three main revenue streams, and what normally 2 out of 3 would be losing money, right? And one of them, so one of those revenue streams might have been, again, the blockchain training side might have no revenue at all. So therefore you've got a revenue stream with no revenue, you've got costs and you've got overhead. So don't do it. you get my logic. So, and from that, you can also, from those two questions, you can understand what's their core business, right? Is it difficult to replicate, and is that sustainable as a source of profit for the future? Yeah. And what's another question? The other thing I do as well is from a relationship perspective, there's a matrix which I do prior to the winning thinking program, before running it. So if you take you and your peers, so, you know, Nanju, if you're the chief exec of your business, or if you're cleaning the floors, whatever level you are, I ask everybody to fill in a matrix, which is support and challenge, right? So how supported do you feel, Nanju, by your team? And how challenged do you feel in a positive way? It's obviously different if you're a chief exec or a board member versus on the shop floor. So people have got different perspectives, but you can be challenged by your team, even if you are the boss. And how supported do you feel by your team? And you put a circle on the chart for everybody does that. And then, but then you say, well, give me some specific examples. And you might say, well, such and such a person says this, and this happened, you know, specific examples. And then what that does is it gives you a very good temperature of where the culture is at. Because if you think about, if you are under supported, under challenged, you're just not floating about doing nothing. You know, under supported, under challenged, you come to work and you go, no, so what? What was that? But if you're supported and challenged, that's where really everybody is to be. So, and that of course is related to people's capability, because the person who's cleaning the floor may feel supported and challenged, going back to have they got the right type of work for them, versus you, if you're running the business, there's different perspectives. So, and that gives you a very clear picture of what's happening in the culture. That needs to be done on a confidential basis, but those three bits of information I think are very helpful for company turnaround. The difficult part about this is, and the reason why I read my books is because people don't understand their own psychology, right? So we've touched on a bit around the psychology of technology, for example. And you've rightly pushed back, and I've rightly tried to clarify what I'm talking about. But there are some things that people don't understand about their own psychology, which is so important to understand. Because if people don't understand what drives them, you know, what gets you out of bed in the morning, and what's holding you back, then, you know, if you can turn that around and become aware of those things in the context of your peers and your teammates, that's a really fantastic place to be. And that's the essence of what I call winning thinking. But actually, you can see winning is a problematic word. We talked a bit about this in this discussion. But actually, it's more like mutual success. Yeah. That's so I don't think it's less about winning.
I have one more question, Tom. When you talk to entrepreneurs or businesses about going zero carbon, so what advice do you give them? Do you want to make it 1 point or 3 points? But how do you?
It's got to be profitable. It's got to be profitable, so it's got to make economic sense. Okay, so has to be sustainable. It has to be the right thing. So I think it's the points I've made already, or tried to make already, which is it's got to make economic sense. It's got to make profit. It's got to, you know, be good for relationships. And I mean, and with a major
you just showed something which was made in China, right? Where we don't really look at how it came from and all that, like even the electric vehicles today. So at an immediate level, people will see the profit in this fashion, where it's not in front of me, it's done somewhere else, so it's okay. So there, how do you address this? Because this is something that I can't see does not exist, right? That's the human behavior. So how do you address that aspect?
Well, it comes back very simply to each, you and I specifically, taking new action to demonstrate that, because talking is no use whatsoever. So I talked about the 5 businesses that I'm involved with and actively leading in some shape or form.
But this is a very long-term thing, right? I mean,
no, it's not. No, it's not. We don't have a. No, I don't think it is long term. Some people get it. The people who don't get that will fail, and there'll be a massive cost. So it's a really difficult challenge, but by demonstrating that and putting that into practice, it's going to be the source of sustainable businesses moving forwards. The rest of them will fail, and interesting enough, China will fail as well, because there's one really interesting thing which may also help this discussion is innovation, right? Comes from freedom, right? So your ability to freely think, and in conjunction with your peers, is the way great ideas take place, and then they grow. Most fail, most businesses fail, but occasionally you get an Apple or another type of business like that which becomes hugely successful, and that only happens in a free society. And if you don't do the right thing, what you tend to create ideology which creates tyranny, and then you get China's type of control, and that squanders innovation, and it eventually turns on itself. So China, the good news is, will eventually turn on itself. Whether or not we trash blow up the entire planet in the meantime, I don't know. But the other thing I'd say as well, from a spiritual perspective, and I think this is important to say, is that if God isn't at the center of what we're doing, then this will get worse, right? This will get worse because it's diabolical, and diabolical feeds more diabolical stuff. So it's very important that good people like you and I, Nanju, do our absolute utmost, not just to talk about things, but actually to make things happen, and actually step over the edge and take new action, and overcome fear. And that's why my books are. That's why I wrote my books, to help people step over the edge, to become aware of what's holding them back, and actually make these things happen without fear. Because I'm a pretty bold person, but I'm not totally without fear. But the reason why I'm courageous is because I'm used to stepping over the edge all of the time. I'm conscious of my dialogue, even though it's my own dialogue. I'm conscious when I'm tripping myself up. I'm conscious of when you rightly challenged me today, when I was being a bit defensive, when I was using terminology that was holding me back. So I really challenged myself, and it's really important that we've got this sort of, as much as, and also got as many people that challenge their own thinking around us. And that really comes down to the top 7 things, which I think are going to keep us healthy. But it's all about taking new action. We've got to take new action. So when I get off this call, what am I going to do to take new action? What am I going to do to make things happen?
All right.
It's not
one question, one last question. So I know you talked a lot about what could be in the future, what might be in the future, and all that. But if you want to make one prediction, what would that be?
Electric vehicles will fail.
You're going to attract a whole lot of criticism for the statement.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. You can call me and discuss. Call me to discuss. Their pure electric vehicle strategy will fail.
All right, fantastic. I think this is like opening up a Pandora box.
Exactly. Let's keep an open mind.
Right.
I've looked at it based on the analysis I've got. That's my conclusion. I mean, when I say fail, right, I don't mean just fail economically. There's lots of implications. There's environmental implications of electric vehicles. It's the broader picture. It's the economic. It's the unaffordability. It's the carbon footprint of electric vehicles. It's the
from a 360-degree point of view, because everybody's talking only from a point of I drive.
Exactly. Yeah. Brilliant point. Exactly right. Thank you for confirming that. So important, because if you look at electric vehicle going to the shops and back without anything else, it might make sense.
In isolation, yes.
It might make sense. It only makes sense in about 5 years. When you look at everything else, you wouldn't do it. So that's my challenging thought to end with, Nanju. So
Well, thank you so much, Tom. I think it's very important that we need voices such as you who keeps pushing people back to look at the 360 degrees of life. It's just not a matter of convenience that what is convenient for me to look at or what's in my sight of vision.
Yeah,
We need
absolutely.
to see what is also not inside of vision, but it is there. It is impacting me and it is impacting our next generation. So it's so important to bring and keep bringing people to this perspective, and hopefully this will get addressed. Uh, so, uh, my thought is that electric vehicle perhaps will not fail once we are able to address the 360 degree
Of course, yeah.
aspects of it,
Yeah, and I
right?
agree.
So
I agree with that. But within that, the fossil fuels are part of that solution. I totally agree. They have a place, but ideology
we
is
we
dangerous.
we need it as well. But yes, this particular ideology is,
Yeah.
yeah. Right. Thank you so much. And once again, I'm sure our audience and listeners enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
Yeah.
And I also urge each of them to please look down, follow Tom. His LinkedIn is there. His activities are there. His business is linked to each of the different businesses is in. Please follow what's happening there. And we didn't talk much about the cycle thing, which I found it very
Yeah.
exciting, very interesting. So please look it up and also check out those books. Uh, do get hold of them, and I think it also makes a great gift if you want to do that.
Yeah.
So and keep following and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much once again, Tom. Thank you so much for making time, and really appreciate your time and thought and the efforts that you're putting in to take everybody towards zero carbon. As much as it sounds so difficult, but I think we need more of you.
Well, thank you, Nanju. And also thank you to you, because it's been wonderful to have a perspective from somewhere else in the world as well. So, and it's been helpful for me to, one, try and organize my thinking, but also to have my thinking challenged. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right.